Hi, I'm Jeremy Brecker with the Labor Network for Sustainability, and the title of this strike commentary is Make the Fossil Fuel Powers Stranded Assets. As Donald Trump is trying to stamp out everything that might power the world without fossil fuels, a green tech revolution is making renewable energy and everything designed to run on it not only better for the climate and environment, but also far cheaper. Trump's energy policies will make the U.S. and other fossil fuel countries and industries into devalued, stranded assets. Meanwhile, a global effort to expand green tech energy and production can save the climate, defeat Trump's fossil fuel imperialism, and make energy affordable for all. There is a specter haunting the fossil fuel powers. As a recent article in the National Interest by Columbia University energy experts Tatiana Mitrova and Anne-Sophie Corbeau put it, what is emerging are two competing models of energy and influence, one anchored in the enduring logic of hydrocarbons, the other in the accelerating promise of electrification. At stake is not just the future of energy systems, but the contours of geopolitical power in the decades ahead. The reality behind the specter is the phenomenal rise of China as the superpower of green tech, sometimes also called clean tech, technology that reduces or repairs harm to the environment. As BP's chief economist recently warned, China is leading the global energy race because of its dominance in building up supply chains for renewable energy and electric vehicles. Or, as a Bloomberg headline put it, U.S. will lose if the EU and China become clean energy buddies. Chinese investment in research has so reduced the costs of producing green energy, vehicles, and other technology needed for a green tech transition that if they were widely adopted, they would produce disaster for the fossil fuel-producing countries, rendering much of their economies as stranded assets. Assets like coal, oil, and natural gas that lose their value because they can't compete with solar, wind, and geothermal energy. Conversely, the widespread adoption of Chinese green tech would move the world far closer to climate safety and free it from the overweening power of fossil fuel companies and countries. China's rise as the green tech superpower is not only a historical fact, it also provides a strategic opportunity for those who want to save the Earth's climate by eliminating fossil fuels, escape domination by the fossil fuel powers, and make affordable climate-safe energy available to all who need it at a reasonable price. If China, Europe, and other non-fossil fuel countries cooperate to lower the cost of the green transition, they could cut greenhouse gas emissions, but also drive down the value of fossil fuels, thereby leaving the economies of fossil fuel-producing countries with stranded assets, not only in their fossil fuel industries, but in the large parts of their economies that are fossil fuel-based. The result would be lower energy costs for consumers around the world, except in the remaining fossil fuel-dependent countries like the United States, Russia, and Saudi Arabia, at least until they are willing to join the green tech transition. The world should aim to adopt the least expensive available green energy systems, which today means primarily Chinese technology and industrial ecosystems, as rapidly as possible. We should let the fossil fuel powers suffocate in their own uncompetitive oil, gas, and coal until they are willing to join the rest of the world in going fossil-free. According to a report from the Australian think tank Climate Energy Finance, China leads the world in R&D, investment, innovation, manufacturing, deployment, and exports of clean tech, including solar, wind, batteries, and new energy vehicles, by an astonishing margin. Its clean tech investments are more than double those of the United States or the EU. The cost of electricity to Chinese consumers is barely half that in the United States. This is not because sunlight or fossil fuels are easier to obtain there. It is largely because Chinese energy technology is far superior, including high-voltage power lines, fossil-free renewable energy, and energy-using products like steel and cars. To take one example, Chinese electric vehicle imports to Europe cost 32% less than European EVs in 2023. According to the International Energy Agency's Clean Energy Equipment Price Index, Chinese solar panels and wind turbine prices are down 60% and 50% respectively since 2022. Although China initially focused on building up its Greentech capacity to reduce its own dependence on fossil fuels, according to Mitrova and Corbeau, China's long-term trajectory suggests a pivot from hydrocarbon-dependent power to a commanding force in an electrified global order. Crucial to this trajectory is foreign investment. The Climate Energy Finance Report details China's new program of huge, historically unprecedented outbound capital flows encompassing the globe, as China's world-leading corporates operating across every key decarbonization sector increasingly go global. Based on our tabulation of investments currently proposed and confirmed, we estimate that Chinese firms have committed more than $100 billion in outbound foreign direct investment across at least 130 major clean tech transactions since 2023. The technology and geographic diversity of this investment program is striking, spanning Europe, Greater Asia, Africa, and South America. China's industrial policy and domestic investment have led to Greentech overcapacity, leading to rapid price deflation. This has led to widespread concern about a flood of Chinese Greentech products being dumped at low prices in other countries. In May 2024, long before Trump's Liberation Day tariffs, the Biden administration announced tariffs specifically targeting green products, including lithium-ion batteries, critical minerals, and solar cells. It quadrupled duties on electric vehicles to 100%. It also released a Foreign Entity of Concern ruling that vehicle manufacturers would not get IRA tax credits if any company in their battery supply chain has 25% or more of its equity, voting rights, or board seats owned by a Chinese government-linked company. Most countries, however, view Chinese Greentech investments as a very different matter from the import of products. Foreign investment is generally viewed as a positive contribution to national economies, providing employment and building up the national industrial base. In the EU, for example, Stellantis has an EV joint venture with China's Leapmotor, and Spain's Ebro EV has one with Chery to build EVs in Barcelona. Such joint ventures often include provisions to address the economic and security concerns of the host countries. According to a Reuters story last summer, Italy was negotiating a deal with China's state-owned Dongfeng that would ensure that at least 45% of the components in cars produced in Italy are sourced from within the country. Italy was also seeking commitments from Dongfeng to manage customer data locally and source critical components like infotainment units from European suppliers. Given the common interests of China and potential recipient countries in expanding Chinese Greentech investment, there appears to be a good deal of room for negotiating joint ventures that protect the interests of both sides. In June 2024, John Podesta, senior advisor to Joe Biden on international climate policy, told an interviewer, The United States is now the #1 producer of oil and gas in the world, the #1 exporter of natural gas, and that's a good thing. He also defended the 100% tariff the Biden administration imposed on electric vehicles and other Greentech products from China, after accusing China of deliberately overproducing green goods. Podesta said, "We're witnessing a renaissance of manufacturing in the United States in the green technology space and will resist unfair trade practices that are going to undermine that investment." In short, the Biden administration policy was to expand fossil fuel production and exports while excluding the increasingly cheaper, superior, and more competitive Chinese Greentech. Donald Trump is one-upping this program of climate destruction and economic nationalism. He is demolishing the modest U.S. Greentech initiatives, for example, by defunding the climate-protecting programs in the Inflation Reduction Act and attempting to block coastal wind projects. At the same time, he is expanding coal, oil, and gas extraction as rapidly as he can as a means to both economic and geopolitical dominance. Trump's fossil fuel policy oscillates between global U.S. energy dominance and a fossil fuel imperial alliance led by the United States, Russia, and Saudi Arabia. According to Metrova and Corbeau, these three countries, with about a third of global oil output, now share a commitment to energy dominance, particularly through fossil fuels, with none supporting a transition away from hydrocarbons. Why is Donald Trump, despite his vow to make the United States the energy superpower, cozying up to what would seem like his competitors, Russia, Saudi Arabia, and the Persian Gulf Emirates? And why is he doing everything possible, not just to deny the reality of climate change, but to decrease renewable energy, even though it would increase U.S. energy production and could complement rather than impede the development of fossil fuels? The obvious reason is that inexpensive green tech, most of it Chinese, is an existential threat to either U.S. fossil fuel dominance or to a cartel of major fossil fuel states. Here is the Achilles heel of all the schemes for global domination by fossil fuel powers. Chinese green tech is now substantially cheaper and better than fossil fuel production. If the rest of the world decides to use the Chinese-developed green tech to undercut the role of fossil fuels, all the investments of the fossil fuel powers in oil, gas, and coal will be rendered stranded assets. Stranded assets are assets whose value is reduced before their expected useful lifetime. If fossil fuels and fossil fuel infrastructure lose their value because they can't compete with green tech, the companies that own them will also lose much of their value. And this is the case not only for fossil fuel companies, but for the entire economic ecosystem based on fossil fuel. As BP's chief U.S. economist warned, the U.S. should be worried about trying to sell a gasoline-fueled Chevrolet Suburban that costs 6 figures. The question is, where will American car companies be able to sell a gasoline truck? How is that going to compete in the international marketplace with a $20,000 EV that can charge in 5 minutes? You need to ask yourself that question. It is not only companies, but also countries that can become stranded assets. By doubling down on fossil fuels, the United States not only risks creating stranded fossil fuel company or auto company assets, it also locks itself into a high-cost energy infrastructure that will be a large and long-lasting liability for its entire economy. Investment in Chinese green tech is expanding in most parts of the world, with the notable exception of the United States, Russia, and other fossil fuel producers. The price of fossil fuels is already falling, largely due to their inability to compete with the falling cost of Greentech. Geopolitical conflicts like the attacks on Iran may drive up the price of fossil fuels for a time, but that will only increase the incentive to invest in fossil-free alternatives. To protect the climate, liberate countries from fossil fuel dependence, and reduce the hegemony of fossil fuel powers, the implementation of Greentech and the collapse of fossil fuel industries needs to proceed much faster to meet the climate protection goals of the Paris Climate Agreement. According to the IEA, the annual investment required in renewable power still needs to double to achieve a tripling of installed renewable capacity by 2030. This needs to be accompanied by rising spending on grids, storage, and other forms of flexibility to ensure secure and cost-effective utilization of this capacity. Spending on efficiency and electrification needs to almost triple within the next 5 years to deliver a 4% annual energy intensity improvement by the end of the decade. The Climate Energy Finance Report lays out a powerful vision of how this can happen. It notes that there is an underdeployment of Chinese low-cost clean tech production capacity, but there is a time-critical opportunity to change that through a faster rollout of decarbonization technologies across the globe. China's research and development and manufacturing scaling up, which has slashed the cost of green technologies, are the key enabler of accelerated global decarbonization. And that is an existential necessity as the climate challenge escalates and nations seek to secure their energy independence. The urgent large-scale adoption of Chinese green tech can be fought for in the arenas of national policy, global cooperation of non-fossil fuel producing countries, and local and subnational governments and communities. In national arenas, those seeking climate protection, national independence, and affordable energy can unite around a program of rapid adoption of Chinese green tech through governmental economic guidance, joint ventures, technology transfers, and subnational and community initiatives. These can all incorporate negotiated provisions for economic development and national independence. As the Climate Energy Finance Report puts it, there is enormous potential for bi- and multilateral partnerships and collaborations on innovating and building new and emerging future-facing energy transition industries as nations leverage Chinese capital and expertise in localized contexts to value-add domestically and derive mutual benefit. Recent announcements in Saudi Arabia, Morocco, Hungary, and Brazil all illustrate a potential game-changing shift in China's strategic direction to better ensure more sustainable win-win collaborations. How do people in fossil fuel-producing countries fit into this picture? Even in these countries, local communities and subnational jurisdictions may be able to circumvent the sometimes porous national import restrictions to access the cheapest and best green tech wherever it comes from. They can launch campaigns to demand that national governments stop blocking their access to low-cost green tech, campaigns that can win wide support on economic as well as climate grounds. They can implant low-cost, high-quality green tech in their own venues. They can be part of the Green New Deal from below movement that is installing green tech with or without the support of national governments. Climate advocates in fossil fuel-producing countries can loudly proclaim the devastating effects of fossil fuel dependence. They can truthfully say that their country's romance with fossil fuels is catastrophic, not only for the climate, but also for the future of their national economies. Every dollar spent on fossil fuel development is a dollar more that can become a stranded asset. By promoting dependence on fossil fuels, these governments have slowed or even reversed the transition to climate safety, and they have doomed their national economies to become stranded assets. Climate advocates can make the demand for Greentech a crucial part of the resistance to Trump, Putin, and the Middle Eastern oil autocrats. The need for global cooperation among non-fossil fuel powers to promote rapid proliferation of low-cost, high-quality green tech is increasingly recognized. According to a recent article in The Guardian, many experts believe the only prospect of staving off climate breakdown is for China, the EU, the UK, and other major economies to form a pro-climate bloc alongside vulnerable developing countries to counter the weight of US, Russia, Saudi Arabia, and petrostates pushing for the continued expansion of fossil fuels. Tacit but large-scale cooperation, or even a grand bargain, to expand global green tech by Europe, China, and the developing and emerging countries could turn the fossil fuel powers, notably the United States, Russia, and Saudi Arabia, into stranded assets. It could crash the economies of the fossil fuel powers, providing massive development for countries exiting the fossil fuel economy, and radically reduce the destruction of the global climate.